Okay, here we go. So we're on dot base, Hamid base, and what we're doing now, we're continuing from the last study. We're summing up the question in Verizon number 2. It says, "Kasal the ani ubnei adam chad shirahu." It was initially assumed that the time a four-person begins. So on the screen it says, it might enter your mind to say that the time when the four-person typically eats his meal and the time when ordinary people eat the Shabbat evening meal are one and the same. It's the same time. Okay, so this is why it's presenting the question. The question is, if you say the four-person and the Kohen eat at the same time from Verizon number 1, the Gemara assumes that on Friday night, when people eat, is the same time the four-person eats during the week. So comes out this machlokas, and the Chacham agree with Rabbi Meir. So where is the machlokas? So if we see here, it says, "I amar ani v'hakohen chad shirahu." Now, if you say that the time given in regard to a four-person and the time given in regard to a Kohen are the same time, Chacham Ve'inu Rabbi Meir. The opinion of the sages in the Berachos is the same opinion of our Meir there. But this cannot be, for the Berachos cites them as opposing views. So the Gemara assumes when the Kohen enters to eat the teruma, it's also identical to the time the four enter to eat. Then that time of the Kohanim is also the same time the people on the Shabbat eat. The sages say the same as our Meir, which cannot be. This cannot be. So therefore, your answer to Verizon number 1, that when the poor eat is the same time as the Kohen, it cannot be. There's a machlokus in Verizon number 2. So first, we're going to continue reading. It says, "Ele shama nina." Rather, you should learn from this that the same time in regard to a four-person is a time to itself, and the time stated in regard to a Kohen is a time to itself. They are different times. This disproves the earlier assertion that they are the same time. So the Gemara is asking, therefore, we'll have to now say that Verizon number 1 is arguing on our Mishnah. That's what this question is. Therefore, saying clearly, Verizon number 2 is a machlokas. If we assume people eat on Erev Shabbos at the same time that the four enters, and there's a machlokas in Verizon number 2, so then you have to say Verizon number 1 is not in agreement with our Mishnah. That when the four enters, it's a different time. It could be later than when the Kohen could eat. A little bit after, says after the stars appear. That would appear in Verizon number 1 is arguing with our Mishnah Verizon number 2. Are the two opinions, that is the argument, this is a full-fledged machlokas. Now the Gemara says you don't have to say that. Okay, so it says lo, the Gemara answers lo. So we're at the second paragraph where, the third, and this is the person. Okay, so it says here, and even a Kohen chad shirahu, the time given in regard to a four-person and the time given in regard to a Kohen are the same time. They're trying to figure out, is this the same time or not? Whereas the time given in regard to a four-person and the time given in regard to all people on the Sabbath Eve are not the same time. So it could be that a four-man in the week and the Kohen eats at the same time. This could be. But now we're going to change. The assumption was wrong. So when the four-man eats during the week and people eat on Friday night is not the same time. The Gemara is asking, why did you assume that? So first, if you guys remember earlier, that there was an argument that the poor that eats in the week is the same time as the Shabbat meal. But The Gemara is saying, no, why would we assume that? And therefore, we say that people eat on Erev Shabbos that would be a later time than that. So now the summary up to this point basically is saying there are 3 times listed in the last 2 brises for the beginning of the evening Shema. The A, when the 4 people enter to eat during the week, when all people enter to eat on Erev Shabbos, when Kohanim who are Tameh may enter eat Teruma, which is when the stars come out. According to the Gemara's current understanding, times A and C are identical. 4 people enter to eat during the week at the same time the Kohanim enter to eat Teruma when the stars come out. And this is from an anonymous Tana of the first Barayza. When a 4-person enters to eat, he agrees with the Tana of our Mishnah when Kohanim enter to eat Teruma. And this view is disputed only by Rab Meir. In the second Barayza, we state the time begins earlier because it's Erev Shabbos. This is what our Meir says. When people enter to eat the Shabbat evening meal, so that becomes the earlier time because it's Friday night. You're davening before the sun comes out. So that would seem to be the conclusion. So let's just read here. Where we're reading that and it is so that the time given in regard to a 4-person and the time given in regard to a Kohen are the same time. And it says, but they contrasted this assertion with the following Barayza. Amasai, from when may one begin to recite the Shema in the evenings? Masha'a Sheikh Hadash Ayom Arve Shabbosos. From the time the day becomes sanctified on Shabbat Eve. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. So the earliest time for evening Shema, the Mishnah says when the Kohanim enter to eat the Teruma. The Barayza number 1 is anonymous when a poor man enters to eat his bread with salt, the same time as the Mishnah's time. Barayza number 2, our Meir, when all people enter to eat on Shabbat Eve, which is a little bit earlier than when the sun goes down, and the Kakaku, when the Kohanim are entitled to eat the Teruma, which makes sense because the Mishnah's opening line is an anonymous statement. The Barayza is an anonymous statement. Barayza number 2, you've got the Chacham, which is good to have as the author of the anonymous statement, and then you've got our Meir who disagrees. So we're up to this point now. Barayza number 3, the Gemara is not finished. We're still holding on that when the poor man eats his bread during the week, it's the same time as the Kohen when he goes, when he's from top, purifies himself and goes to Teruma. The Gemara is now going to show us one more Barayza with holding this one with this one, and we can no longer hold to that idea because the Gemara asks, and it says, yeah, what I just read, so the time given in regard to a 4-person and the time in regard to Kohen, are they the same time? But there is a dispute. From when may one begin to recite the Shema in the evening? From the time the day becomes on Shabbat. These are the words of our Eliezer. So we still want to say it's one time. We will say from another Barayza that brings 6 different opinions. So there's going to be 6 different opinions that it's not really at the same time. And one Mishnah, 3 Barayzas are all asking the same question. Opinion number 1, on the day it becomes sanctified on Erev Shabbos. Now, when do we bring in Shabbos? When the stars come out. Is it? No. The latest is actually the twilight when the sun sets. So we actually bring in Shabbat before the stars come out, right? Just let me know if you guys interrupt me if I'm just not making sense or anything. But yeah, feel free to jump in. So it's basically at Bain Hashmasos, which since this time is uncertain, Shabbos must be commenced at that time, a little before sunset. So can we actually begin reciting the Shema and this time throughout the week? Exactly when Bain Hashmasos begins is a number of disputes we will find later on. They're gonna actually have a machlokas, a discussion of when this actual time is, when it begins, and what is twilight in halakha. So a baraisa cited in Shabbat records a Tanaic dispute. According to Rav Yehuda, whose view is accepted as halakha, Bain Hashmasos begins at sunset. Now there's going to be an argument. When is sunset? So there's going to be a whole discussion on when it actually is sunset. When the sun is just dipping down, or is it when it's all the way down? It's actually a whole discussion. Okay. And so anyway, it begins, we're going to just say, for argument's sake right now, it begins at sunset. All right. Shabbat Shalom for those who are just entering. Welcome. And so, anyway, when it begins at sunset.
Joseph.
Yep.
I have a question. When we light the candle, that does not mean that we started the Shabbat, right?
Well,
we only start when we recite the Kabbalah Shabbat, right? And then we accept upon ourselves the holiness. Because I was reading something, that's why I'm asking, because I don't think I understood very well. It's like we can still do a few things that we would not do after the Kabbalah Shabbat if we lit the candle without the intention that to bring Shabbat at that moment. We only bring once we say the Kabbalah Shabbat. Is that right?
That's an interesting question, you know.
I think Rabbi Eliezer's point is, from the beginning of this Berachos, the highlighted portion I have here, when he says from the time when the day becomes sanctified. Remember Exodus 20, verse 8, Ve Kadsho, to keep it holy. That means we have the responsibility of sanctifying the day. That entails Kiddush on wine, as well as the Berachos on the candles, and the other Berachos that are recited when welcoming the sanctity of the day.
So that's an actually interesting.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking, because in the Siddur said that when we say the Kabbalah Shabbat, then we accept upon ourselves the holiness of Shabbat. That's when Shabbat starts. Not at the second that you light the candles.
Well, the thing is, when sunset hits, it happens, whether you're ready for it or not. That's the other thing you have to consider.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that.
Right, because we light the candle.
For example, I lit the candle 1 hour earlier today, almost an hour earlier before sunset. But until I do the Kabbalah Shabbat, until I do the Psalm 29, it's not Shabbat.
Yeah, you know what? I don't want to say.
That's why I'm asking, because.
Yeah, I don't want to say a wrong answer, because you're right. This is before the actual stars come out, and let me review that in the Shulchan Aruch, and I'll put it in the group, because I don't want to say the wrong answer. But also, because I'm just in the habit, once my candles are lit, I just automatically say it's Shabbat. But technically, halachically, I'd have to review that for sure. Just to let me double check that. I don't want to say it. Yeah, it's actually a good question.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so Yeah, this is definitely all learning for exactly. We should know the times better and know this should just help our observance get much better, you know. So, anyways, yeah. So there's gonna be a dispute. Where was it? With Rabbi Yehuda's view. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna say for when when is Bain Hashmasos begin? Like when the sun is just dipping down or all the way down, and so we're just gonna say for argument's sake right now. You see how intense and how specific this can actually get. That's why I don't even want to answer this question because you got one of the sages saying, well, Ben Hashmasos is at this time, and another rabbi saying, no, it's not at this time. So, and this is like, well, we're gonna see. So it goes. So if it begins at sunset, it goes until the stars come out, which is another debate. How long is Bain Hashmasos? So Ar Yehuda's view is a dispute by Ar Yosei. Okay, as we're going to read on, our Ar Yosei is going to say it's that Bain Hashmasos is really it's like just a second. It's a blink of an eye. So that's like right when the sun's going down and darkness is coming in, and it's like it's just a snap of a finger. There's also what does Ar Yehuda mean by sunset? Okay, in the view of the Geonim, sunset is the disappearance of the ball of the sun from the sky. According to Rabbeinu Tam, this is where you get the later ending of Shabbos. However, Rav Yehuda refers to a much later time known as the second sunset, which is when light completely disappears from the dome of the sky and is visible only as a reddish glow in the west. In other words, the first opinion of Rabbi Yehuda is that when you can't see the sun anymore, but it's still very bright outside. So even though the sun, you can't even see it anymore, you still see daylight. And the ball is down, but it's like daylight. But Rabbeinu Tam says, no, that's not sunset. Sunset is when you get only the reddish glow in the west. So basically, it's darker. There's much less light, and this is why the Hasidim actually daven mincha after sunset because of that. Okay, and so Ar Yehuda says the day is over at sunset. Well, when is sunset? The Geonim say that sunset is when the ball is invisible. That's when Shabbos starts. That's when twilight begins. We don't know when the next day starts, and we're not in this day anymore. So let's say it's Wednesday, and we see the reddish glow, but we don't know when this day is officially over, and you shouldn't daven during twilight. Rabbeinu Tam explains, no, it's actually still today, but I don't see the sun. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if you see light. So still today, if there's light, when there is only red in the horizon, which can be about 18 minutes or so. That's normally when we actually light the candles. Now the day is over, and now we begin twilight. So even, yeah, officially, just from my thoughts here, officially, Shabbat hasn't officially started because the sun hasn't gone completely down. The stars haven't appeared. But once you light those candles, does that mean it's sanctified now? That I gotta review. And for those that are just watching or coming in, I'm not really teaching. We're just studying together. I'm doing my best to learn Gemara and pushing myself. So I'm not no rabbi and not an expert, but I do study well. And the questions that are brought up, I'm going to go and study. So anyways, now the day is over. Now we begin twilight. So anyhow, the first opinion of this variety says when we sanctify the Shabbos, well, it has to be at twilight. Okay, when we sanctify the Shabbat, it has to be at twilight. Now there's a machlokas again. When is twilight? For now, we'll just say it's at sunset. We make it simple. That is an earlier time than actually in the Mishnah. Our Mishnah says when the stars come out, and that's the opinion of our Eliezer. Our Yehoshua. So we go to the Gemara here. So when I say, it says Amasai, Likros Shema the Arvin. From when may one begin to recite the Shema in the evenings? Masha'a Shechadal Shayom Arvi Shabbasos. From the time the day becomes sanctified on the Shabbat evening. Okay. Sorry, just 1 second here. Okay, and it says Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. So everyone should see it right there on the screen there. Our Yehoshua, our Yehoshua says, from the Kohanim who were Tameh become Tahor to the extent of being able to eat the Teruma. So our Eliezer says we can recite the Shabbat when the day becomes sanctified in Shabbat, when the sanctification of Shabbat begins. And our Yehoshua says when the Kohanim become Tahor to be able to eat their Teruma. Two different opinions here. Rabbi Meir says, Masha Asha HaKohanim Tovim Lechol V'Yisromasan. From the time the Kohanim who were Tameh immerse themselves to be able to eat their Teruma that night. So now we got our Meir in Berachos 2. He says when people eat their meals, here he says when the Kohanim, let's see here, dip in the mikvah. 1 second here. Yeah, let's read on a bit more. So the Brisa, the Meir says in Berachos number 2, when people eat their meals, here he says when the Kohanim dip in the mikvah before they can eat the teruma. When is that going to be? It has to be before sunset. So this becomes a different opinion. Opinion number 1, R. Eliezer says at twilight, at sunset. The opinion of our Yehoshua is when the stars come out. Rabbi Meir says before the sunset, and the question is, how can you say the Shema before the sunset? And the fourth opinion we're going to get to is Rabbi Hanina, and it says here, Rabbi Hanina said, from the time a poor person enters to eat his evening meal of bread with salt. Okay. And this is talking about the regular evening meal, which will be later than when the poor man eats. So this is actually talking about 2 different kind of meals, because they have, why is the regular people eating being mentioned? Why is it a different time than the poor person enters to eat the meal? Because the regular people they're not poor, so they have lots of food to prepare. Okay. Now, and then the Gemara says, and Rabbi Achai, and some say Arachah said, Masha Sharu B'nei Adam Niknasin Lahateh. From the time most people enter the recline to eat their evening meal, the Gemara says, now, if you say that the time stated in regard to a poor person and the time stated in regard to a Kohen are the same time, Rabbi Chanina, Chaninu, Rabbi Yehoshua, then the opinion of Rabbi Chanina, who states the time in terms of a poor person, is the same as the opinion of our Yehoshua, who states in the time of the terms of a Cohen. So Rabbi Chanina says in the Berachos 3, it's a different time. It's a new opinion. Therefore, the Gemara concludes that when the Mishnah states that when the Kohanim enters, it's when the stars appear, horizon number 1, when the poor enter, it must be a different time. And the Gemara is going to ask, but which one is sooner and which one is later? Okay? Is it when the stars appear, when the poor enter to eat? Horizon number 2 clearly is an argument when sunset or when people eat on Erev Shabbat is a different time. So even if this is confusing right now, because we did 2 other videos previous, and even myself, I'm going to go through the Gemara again and again, even know this even better from the top of my head. So it may seem confusing right now to some, but if you review, I mean, Gemara is not easy to learn. So this is what I'm pushing myself to do, and it's good for us to want to grow. So anyways, horizon number 3 really tells us there's 5 different times. There's 5 different times. So when the Gemara is saying in horizon number 1, it argues with our Mishnah. Horizon number 2 already has a machlokas. Horizon 3 clearly is a 5-way machlokas. Now, what we have done to determine which one is earlier, the Kohanim eating at the appearance of the stars, or when the pauper, the poor person eats his food, we don't know. We don't know which one is earlier, and we also have to decide on the other times to resolve these contradictions. So there's different opinions being stated here of when one can say the Shema. Now that we said that the time the poor enters to eat and the stars coming out are not the same time, now we got to know which one is earlier or later. Which one of the 2 times? So it says here, Ele lav shama mina. Is everybody still following me here? I think, Shlomo, I think you might have to scroll down a bit.
I have the Sulcana Rook open up to the laws of Ma'ariv.
Okay, perfect. If you find that question or whatever. So we're at here, rather, okay, right where it says that the second bottom paragraph there, rather it is not that you learn from this that the time stated in regard to a poor person is a time to itself, and the time stated in regard to a Kohen is a time to itself. The 2 times are different. Shma mina. Indeed, learn from this that the 2 times are different. So which one of these times is later, the later time? The Gemara answers, and it says it is logical to say that the time of the poor person is the later of the 2 times. Okay? And so, or if you say that the time the poor person is the earlier time, it would follow that of Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Eliezer. The opinion of Rabbi Chanina in the last variety of the time a poor person eats bread with salt is the same as the opinion of our Eliezer, that the time becomes sanctified on Shabbat Eve. So this would be pointless to actually say the same time. There must mean some kind of different time. Okay, so rather it is not from that you learn from this that the time of the poor person is the later time. Shma mina, indeed learn from this that the time of the poor person is at a later time. So our mayor says that when the Kohanim immerse, he's going to say, but that's daytime when people don't go to sleep. So if we look again, following this, we're still on track here. Rather, okay, Shlomo, I think you need to scroll down a bit more for everybody, please. Yeah, right. Oh, and this is awesome right here. It's got the, so you run under, keep it there. Go down a touch. Slow-mo, scroll down just a touch. No, the other way. Please.
Oh.
Going too far. Right there. So right there. No, just leave it. So you got the chart there. These are the opinions and the reasoning. So this is awesome the way this is laid out for us. Okay. And so we're going to come back. The Gemara is going to return to the challenge posed by Ar Yehuda to Ar Mer in the Baraisa. Okay, so it says, Amar Mar. The master said in the Baraisa, Amar le Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said to Ar Mer, how can you say that the time one may begin reciting the evening Shema is equivalent to the time the Kohanim immerse themselves? When Kohanim must immerse themselves while it's still day. When people do not yet go to sleep, then how can one fulfill the Shema at this time? This is the argument against Ar Mer. And here's something interesting about Rabbi Meir that in the introduction to the Talmud, I just thought it was pretty cool. Some little things if you guys don't know who Ar Mer is. The Ar Mer is actually one of the greatest Tanaim. He's the third most frequently mentioned sage in the Mishnah. And he's basically a foundational architect of the Mishnah that would be codified by Ar Yehuda Hanasi. That's when we read about the master, Amar Mar, the master. That's referring to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And Ar Mer shone like a bright light. The Hebrew name for Mer actually means illuminator. And he's illuminating the Talmudic landscape that we have before us today with his Torah and with his piety. And what's interesting is the tradition handed down to us in the Talmud reports that Ar Mer was descended from the Roman Emperor Nero, who, fearing divine retribution, were he to destroy Jerusalem, fled Rome, and converted to Judaism. And that's something I learned a while back, and I was blown away by this because I always thought Nero was the big bad guy persecuting the Jews and had his hand in Rome in all of this. But the Gemara states that he converted to Judaism. Another thing is we never really followed the rulings though of Ar Mer because he studied under the Tana Elisha ben Abuya, a great Torah scholar who became later known as Acher, which literally means other, and he abandoned the Torah. I even have a video on this in Devarim about how Acher had an argument with the Ramban Nachmanides, saying that we discussed with Ramban, you say that everything around us, everything in the universe is mentioned in the Torah. And Acher asked Ramban to prove it. It's such an amazing story. And Ramban, he said, give me some time to think about this. And he went and davened, and Chodesh Baruch Hu gave him some insight. And he came back to Acher and showed him a verse about one who is basically, and not, of course, basically a heretic. And the initial letter spelled out Rabbi Acher, right in the Torah. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, that's a little bit about Ar Mer. And I just wanted to throw that in there because I was reviewing it and forgot some things. I thought that was awesome. Anyway, so
from what I understand about Rab Meir, he's one of the most quoted of the Tanaim.
Yeah, he's all over it. And so basically, we read here that Ar Yehuda challenges Ar Mer and presents an objection, a valid objection. And so then the Gemara says, well, what is Ar Mer's view? And it says, the Rabbi Meir, Achi Hamar Le. This is what Ar Mer would say to Rabbi Yehuda. Do you think that I'm referring to your understanding of Bein Hashmasos? Remember, I said there's a machlokas of when and how long Bein Hashmasos is. And so he says, I am referring to Bein Hashmasos as explained by our Yosef, the Mar Rabbi Yosef. And our Yosef said the duration of Ben Hashmasos is like the blink of an eye or the twinkle of an eye, which is something that's not even new in the Brit Hadashah, right?
Well, that's almost a point that Tosafos brings up when I was going over him, that when you do Ma'ariv, in some cases, it's right after Minka. So basically a blink of an eye, speaking metaphorically.
Well, here these guys are actually taking it literal, but is that the proper view? And this is our mayor's view, and he says, this night enters and this day departs. And during this very short period of transition, it is impossible to determine whether it is day or night. So now they have a machloket of really how long this really is. Our Yehuda says that twilight, one opinion is that it begins at sunset and ends when the three stars appear. So that is a long duration of Bein Hashmasos. Our mayor says it's a twinkle of an eye, basically. It's a blink of an eye. And our Yehuda asked, you go before sunset, how can that be? That we say Shema, Machlokas. There's a Machlokas here. Our mayor says, you think I was referring to twilight? That twilight begins at sunset, and therefore the Kohen is going to do the mikvah before the sunset? He says, I don't hold to that. That's when twilight is. Remember, you got to go to the mikvah before twilight. Our Yossi, he said, yeah, our mayor says, I hold to our Yossi. And so basically, it's such a small time. Actually, according to our, this is actually quoted in another Verizon Shabbos 34b. According to our Yosef, Ben Hashmasos occurs immediately prior to Zeis HaKokavim, the three stars, the appearance of the stars. And last just for 1 second. Prior to that is legally considered day, and the Kohanim may therefore immerse themselves up until the time and still be fit to eat teruma a few minutes later when the stars come out, which is very short time to do all of this mikvah and then go right into that. It's a short time. The Kohen basically has them immersed in 2 minutes before it gets dark, according to our mayor's view. Our Yehuda is a longer time. In summary, the Gemara has quoted 3 Berachos. The Gemara attempted to establish that 2 of these times prior, that 2 of these times the poor enter to eat and the Kohen whose Tame may eat are the same time. What we prove is that they are not. The poor eat after the Kohanim. Our Eliezer says, so basically in the beginning, that was the argument, that the poor eat when the Kohanim eat, or when the stars come out. But we now, through all of these arguments, we prove this is not. So our Eliezer says from the time, so now to just do a little bit of a summary here of these opinions. I don't know if the chart's going to say it the same way. I think it is. No. So I'm going to say the opinions of the sages in chronological order of the timeline of when we say the Shema. So our Eliezer says from the time that Shabbat is sanctified, sunset. Our mayor says from when Kohen immerse themselves prior to the stars. Our Yehoshua says when the stars come out. Our Hanina says when the poor eats after the stars. And another opinion, our mayor of the second Baraza has another opinion, when people eat their Erev Shabbos meal. There's a question whether this is the later time than the previous one. And so now the Rishonim get involved. The Rishonim say the week and Shabbos meals are the same time. Rashi actually says the Shabbos is later than the weekday time, and actually is the latest of all times. Our Achai says when the time the regular people eat during the week, which is the latest time with Rashi's opinion. So now to clear all this up, we're just going to go to 3A for a moment and just do a bit of it, and then we can discuss. So yeah, scroll down to one statement of our mayor contradicts the other statement of our mayor. So our mayor made a statement previously in the Brisa, and then later comes along and then makes another statement. And so here it says that Hasha, the Rabbi Meir, Ad Rabbi Meir. So it says the two Brisas were authored by two different Tanaim. There was actually two different Tanaim that actually viewed each opinion differently. So the Gemara notes a similar contradiction between the view of our Eliezer cited in our Mishnah and the view of our Eliezer cited in the Baraisa. It says one statement of our Eliezer contradicts the other statement of our Eliezer. For in our Mishnah, our Eliezer states that the earliest time one may recite the evening Shema is when the Kohanim who were Tameh are permitted to begin eating Teruma when the stars appear. Whereas in the Brisa, our Eliezer rules that the time is when the Shabbat becomes sanctified at Bein Hashmasos, which is before the stars appear. And now the Gemara answers this. Let's see here. Shlomo, I need you to go to where it says our Eliezer contradicts the other statement of our Eliezer. Yeah, 3A. Oh, my bad. Yeah, keep rolling down, please. Here we go. Yeah, this is what I'm reading here. And now I'm going to read down a little bit more. Yeah, right there. So the Mishnah and the Baraisa were authored by two different Tanaim who differed as to the view actually held by our Eliezer. And if you an alternative answer, and if you prefer, say, the first clause of the Mishnah, which gives the time one may begin reciting the evening Shema, is not the ruling of our Eliezer. And so I'm just going to finish right there. We can discuss. I'm going to stop the recording.